Hello and welcome back to CSS3 Animations. In your Lesson 7 folder, we've added some more to your index.html file and to your CSS file in order to get what you see here. And so I realize this isn't the most attractive, cohesive website design you've ever seen, but it has a few items on it that we can play around with and that we're going to experiment with using CSS3 animations. So for this particular video, I want to focus on the three social media buttons that we have at the top of our sidebar. So I'm going to jump back into TextMate, where I have these files open in the Lesson 7 folder. And if we go to our index, you can find the social media icons. Up here at the top, we have our main nav, which we've already talked about, which are these buttons up at the very top of the screen. And just below that, we have a div with the class of container. That container div contains all of the rest of our content below that nav bar. And then inside that container, we have a div with the class of sidebar. And then down here towards the bottom right, here's where that sidebar div ends. And then the next div with main content comes into play, and that contains everything in the right column of our website. So in the sidebar, which starts right here, we have an unordered list with a class of social. This is the list that contains our social media icons. So it's in an unordered list, but we've taken away the bullet points and things like that for that unordered list. Plus we've arranged it so that they each float to the left so that they're laid out horizontally instead of stacked on top of each other. In this video, I want to explore how we can animate the rotation and the scale of each of these items in CSS3. So let's jump back into our code and get started. So I'm going to open up CSS3 animation.css, and the code for this, you'll notice that each of these sections is labeled with comments, so that makes it easy to find. And here we have the social media buttons section. So that starts up here around line 95 of your CSS file. So as I've mentioned, we've created this unordered list, and it has a class of social, and here we have a few styles applied to it. We've set the list style type to none so that we don't have those bullet points there. We've set the height, the margins, and the width. And then for each list item, we've set it to float to the left so that these list items can be stacked next to each other instead of on top of each other. And then we've given each one a little bit of a margin to the right of it so that they can space themselves out a little bit. Well, what I want to do now is I want to animate the image within that list item so that it rotates whenever we hover over it. And if we look in our HTML and go down to our div with the class of sidebar, if you're finding it difficult to locate, you can just do a Command F in most text editors, or Control F if you're using a PC to find the text, and you can just do a search for class equals social, and that'll get you there pretty quickly. But it's located right here. It's this unordered list right here. So inside that unordered list, we have each list item, which contains an anchor tag, and inside that anchor tag or link is an image, and those images are contained inside this IMG folder within the Lesson 7 folder. So again, just so we understand how it's all arranged, we have a list item that contains an anchor tag, which contains an image. So let's jump back into our CSS and let's animate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate the image itself. So we need to apply this transition property to the image within this list item. So we're going to create a new rule for social space list item. We're going to look for the anchor tag within that list item, so space A and then space IMG. So we're going to look for the images within an anchor tag within a list item, which is within the unordered list with the class of social. So inside that particular rule, we're going to create our transition property. And we've already talked about a shorthand, which is this transition property, which allows us to type in the name of the property that we want to animate, the duration, and the easing function we want to use. We can do all of that on one line, but we can make this even easier by typing all instead of a specific property name. So if all of the animations that you're going to apply to this particular image are going to have the same duration and easing function, then we can use the all keyword here to make that a lot easier so that we don't have to type out each individual property. So this is just a shorthand of the shorthand, which makes things even easier. So we'll say all space, and let's say we want this particular animation to take up 0.3 seconds, just like our other ones. And then I want to use the same ease function that we've been using. So before we go through the trouble of making all of our vendor prefixes, let's go ahead and get this working, since I know I'm using a browser where this will work. So I'm going to skip a couple lines here, and then we'll create our rule for when we hover over that image. So we're going to point to .social space li space a, and it's usually the anchor tag itself where you would apply the hover state. So we're going to say a:hover space image. So when we hover over that anchor tag, we're going to apply this to the image inside that anchor tag. So what we're going to do here is let's start off just by rotating the object. So we're going to use the transform property, and the specific property we're going to transform is the rotation. And the way we do that in CSS is we say transform : and then rotate, and then inside parentheses, we type how far we want it to rotate. Well, when I hover over these list items or these social media icons, I want it to just spin around all the way, a full 360 degrees. So the end state is going to be the same as the beginning state, but it's going to rotate all the way around. And the way we do that is we type in 360 DEG for degrees. If you didn't want to rotate it that much, you could just type in 180 degrees and it would, or 180 DEG, and it would rotate it around 180 degrees until it was turned upside down. But I'm going to go up to a full 360 degrees. And since we used the all keyword up here, it doesn't matter what properties we change inside this particular rule, it's going to animate everything that's able to be animated in CSS within that rule. So let's save that, and let's see if that works. Jump into Chrome, refresh our page, and now when we hover over the Facebook button, it's not doing anything. Let's refresh again. All right, let's see what's going on. Let's jump back, and we might actually need the vendor prefixes here. So let's copy that, paste it, paste it, paste it, and then we'll add the vendor prefixes for this. So -webkit, -transform, -moz, -transform, and -o. Actually, we also need a Microsoft vendor prefix there. So -ms, -transform, then -o. Oops, not I. And then we'll come down to the next line and then just do transform by itself. So let's save that and then try to refresh it. And there we go. Now it's working. So when you're doing these rotations, make sure that you include all of those vendor prefixes there just to make sure it works everywhere. And it looks like it's working just fine. So we'll refresh our page again. And then as we hover over each item, we see that it rotates all the way around. We move our mouse cursor away from it, and it rotates back. All right, that's a cool effect. So let's also make it grow. Let's make it scale upwards. So we could say that we want to change the width and height of it, but there's a much easier way to do it, and that's using the scale property. And the way we can do that is inside this transformation, we can add scale, and then the multiplier we want to scale it by. So if we typed in 1 here, then that would do 100%, which basically wouldn't do anything. But if we do something like 1.5, then it would scale it up 150%. So let's highlight that, everything including that space there, copy it, and then we'll paste it here for each version of that property. And notice there's no comma in between, there's just a space after the scale, and then we have the rotate. So we're actually performing transformations on the scale and the rotate property at the same time. So let's save that, jump back into Chrome, refresh our page, and now it's not only spinning around, but it's also getting larger. Now it doesn't look too good once it gets to the larger size because of pixelation issues, but I just wanted to show you that that can be done. And now that we have done it, I'm going to turn the scale off. I'm going to leave the rotate on, because it's kind of a cool feature, but we're going to turn the scale off, and we'll actually, in a future video, get to a point where we're using this scale property again, but for now, we'll just get rid of it. And I don't know if you can see this. If I refresh the page and hover over these buttons, you'll see there's a slight flicker on the screen when I'm doing this. And I'm fairly certain that that's just because of the video recording, because this wasn't doing this earlier when I was doing this on my own. So that's just a glitch with the video. Hopefully you won't see that on your own screen whenever you do this, but that's how you create a rotation effect. And once again, we're using a shorthand of a shorthand property by using this all keyword here. So this will include anything we decide to change between the anchor tag and the hover for that anchor tag. Anything that we decide to change here will be animated, as long as it's a property that can be animated in CSS3. So that wraps it up for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.